Hello guys, and welcome to this particular video. We'll be looking at a very special concept in JavaScript called functions. What are functions? In JavaScript and in programming as a whole, function are pieces of code, or a piece of code, or a block of code that can actually perform a particular action or function. Okay, so it's just a piece of code that has been written that can carry out a particular or a specific action. And now we have two major types of functions. We have what I will refer to as the inbuilt functions, in which you have seen already. What are those functions in which you have seen already? For example, the inbuilt function we have with JavaScript, we have something like the alert. That is an inbuilt function. Which other one have we used that you think is actually a function? Yes, you are right on point. The prompt. And one thing you should notice is that each time I write a function, I have this open and close bracket. What could that mean? We have a whole lot to cover as far as this particular video is concerned. Alright, another one you have seen is the console.log, which I can definitely call this a method. And what the differences between a method and the other functions, we'll get to see that in our subsequent videos. But just know that each time we write a function, in order to execute it, we add the opening and the close bracket. Alright, apart from the inbuilt functions, can we actually create our own functions? The answer is yes, hereby leading us to the second types of functioning, which I will refer to as the custom function, the functions in which we create on our own. How can we do that? This is the basic structure. The first thing you do, you write function. After that, you give it a name. You give that function a name. So in this case, I can say something like work. Function work. But it is not complete. We have to give it that opening and close bracket, and then open and close a curly bracket. So this is the basic structure of a function. The first thing, you declare it like this by writing the name of the function, followed by an open and close bracket, and then we begin to write the body of the function. What do we want this function to do? In this case, I can just say console.log. Console.log what? Let's say hello world. Hello world. Now, this is our function. So we expect to go to the console to see hello world, but the console will not display hello world. Now let's check that out. Okay, so my console is already open. Let me open it again. For those of us that have actually forgotten how to open your console, you can do Control, Shift, and letter I, or you can right click. You click on Inspect. You click on Inspect, and when the interface pops up, you now click on Console. Alright, or alternatively, you can just tap on F12. You see, the console is already open. Now, the console opening, I expect to see my hello world being displayed. It will not be displayed. The reason is because after building or writing a function, you have to call or execute that function. How do we call a function? We call a function by writing the name of that function and then followed by the opening and close bracket I told you initially. The opening and close bracket stands for function execution. Now let's see what we have now. I save my work and then refresh. We have hello world being displayed on the console. All right. Now we have two methods or two major methods of building a custom function. The first one is called function declaration. The first one is called function declaration. Function declaration is the one in which we have done so far. This is the structure of the function declaration. We say function, we give it a name, opening and close bracket, followed by a curly bracket, and then we begin to write whatever we want, and later on we call it. Alright. We can also have another method called function expression. Function expression. In function expression, this is how we carry out that particular one. We give it a variable. Let's say, let me build it with the same name again. So work, then equals to, then we now say function and then a curly bracket. Now I want you to take note of something. There is no name for this particular function here. So another name for this particular method, you can also call it anonymous function. Okay, so you notice that there is no name, just a variable. So we can still do the same thing by saying console.log hi. Okay, so the question now is, since we have an anonymous function, if we want to call it, how do we go about that? Let's see what we have on the console first. We are looking forward to having a hi. So I save and refresh. I can actually call it by just using the name of that variable. Let's see how that goes. We refresh. So you see hi. Alright. So you see this particular function, we don't really have a specific name for it, but rather we assigned it a variable. Then as far as function is concerned, another thing you will actually notice in most people's project is that we have functions with parameters and arguments. What kind of functions can we operate using parameters and argument? Let's say, for example, we have a function. Now I'm going to be using the function declaration throughout for now, because personally that's the one you get to see most. Alright, so we can say, let's say function say, then our curly bracket. I want you to notice something. In our previous function, I did not type anything inside of this bracket, so I can say something like maybe anything. Alright, so what I'm typing in here is called a parameter. What I'm typing in here is called what? A parameter. Alright, so now I will now say console.log. Now what's the differences between this particular function and this one? The difference is because now I can say anything. This one is more dynamic, because whenever I'm calling this function like this, say, this is how we call it, right? Say is how we call it. I have to pass in something here, and whatsoever I pass in here is what we'll see on the console. So I can say how are you? So let's go to the console and see what we have. It says how are you? So I can actually change it from here from time to time without touching this function. So let's just keep it at how. I save and refresh. So you see it changes. Now you get to see people using the word parameters and argument interchangeably. The one we pass in here with the function is the one we call the parameter. Then while calling it, the value we now pass in is the argument. Now one of the major uses or the function of this particular aspect of programming we are looking at called function is the fact that it helps us reduce repetition of code. There is something we call dry in programming. Dry meaning do not repeat yourself. Do not repeat yourself. So you see, assuming I wanted to make use of this, I wanted to write this particular code over and over, I can just be calling it as a function, saving me lines of code and a whole lot of stuff. Now let's see whether we can do basic calculation using function. So let's say I can do functions, maybe we call this sum. Function sum. This sum we are looking forward to adding two numbers. We don't know those two numbers, so let me call it x comma y. You understand? I pass in a parameter x comma y. So let's just say, let's say alert. Let's use alert here. Alert x times y. So whatsoever value we put in for x and y, multiply them. So now when I want to call the function, I can now say, okay, sum. Let's use addition. So we can now say sum 7, 5. Sum 7, 5. So we refresh and see what we have. 7 plus 5 is 12. So you see, assuming we're building something that requires us making use of addition from time to time, instead of writing this 1, 2, 3 all over again, we'll just be using sum for it over and over again without actually getting to write a whole lot of stuff. Alright, let's see whether we can build something very little with what we have learned so far. Let's say we wanted to have still this sum, that calculate two numbers, and if any of the number is greater than 50, the system should be able to say, oh, that's too difficult. But if it is not, then the system should be able to say, hey, of course I can do it. Okay, all right, so let's get started. We can do something like function, then we call this maybe calculator or whatsoever. Let's call it calculate. All right, so we're expecting two parameters, so I can use a and b. Okay, can use a and b, and then I'll now bring conditionals. I can now say something like, if a is greater than 50, or b is greater than 50. Okay, this is how we do that. We can say alert it is too difficult. It's too difficult, else alert what do you want to do? You want to add it, a plus b. All right, now let's see how this works. So we call the function calculate. You can give it two numbers. Let's say maybe 42 and 2. Looking forward to having 44. So you see, it says 44. Now let's try having something like maybe 78 here, and then 92 here, which is a bit complex and beyond what we were looking at. See, it is too difficult. All right. Then another thing, the previous code we built, can we actually have that here during the conditional, that our little project? Let's say we just change this name to work. Okay, we don't need a parameter for that, so let me get that code. Then it started from here. I actually commented it out, then I will just copy it and paste it here. It works perfectly well. So since the name is what? Work, we now call it. Then when we go to our browser, let's see what we have. You see, the code actually starts running. Now the question will be, what if I did not call the function like we checked or we saw initially? Let's check that again. We refresh. It's not working. So you always endeavor to call your function. I know this can be a bit overwhelming, but I just go through the video again, follow it bit by bit. I can assure you, no distant time, you'll get a whole concept correctly. Thank you very much for staying up to this point, as I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye bye for now.